Hey guys, welcome JazzMemes family. Today we have Bill Muter. Welcome, Bill. Thanks for coming on. And
Yeah.
Bill, if you guys don't know Bill Muter, he's a multi-instrumentalist, author, educator. He's performed with the likes of Snarky Puppy Horns, Mark Lettieri, Sean Martin, Mono Neon, James Francis, and more personally, Bill and I shared the bandstand with Sarah Wright from Postmodern Jukebox, the tap dancer. She's killer. So that's how I know Bill. But we wanted to bring Bill on today because he's so diverse in what he does, and we really think he's got some amazing tips for you guys and some really interesting concepts when it comes to his album and some of the projects he's working on. So welcome, Bill.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you guys. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well, you first came to our attention when you did your book. You wrote your book, Topless in Tokyo, but it's also
Yeah.
not just a book. What can
Yeah.
you tell us a little bit more about how the idea came about and how that combines with your musical background?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm not topless in any of the book. So if anybody's wondering,
That's good. It's
it's
not
like,
saying
good
yeah.
lord,
Not
we
that
got
kind
this
of
tuba
book.
player on here
Yeah.
that wrote a topless book. I do not want to see a tuba player topless. That does not happen at all in the book.
It's not the sales pitch.
Yeah. So it started in a couple. There was probably two things happening at the same time that came together to make this book happen. I mean, Kevin, there's been this kind of long, I mean, we've been on the road together. There's been this long going joke that anytime we're on the road, you have all this extra time. We tend to tell stories and stuff like that and just keep each other busy. And I never thought about it, but I've always had, I guess, these kind of crazy stories about in my earlier years, like in my 20s and stuff, when I was touring with different groups and different artists and stuff that we've come across. And it was our mutual friend Drew Tucker, vibraphone player, who was like, dude, you got to write this stuff down, man. Like this stuff is gold. And I already at that time I'd already published a book before, so the thought of doing another book was not like a scary thing to me. I'm like, okay, well, why would anybody want to just hear like it wasn't enough there for me to like actually act on it. So and then I'm going back and I'm at the same time I'm recording an album, and I've realized that my strong point from a sales perspective has been my books. That's one of my most successful things is just my book sales as a musician, and not necessarily the music. So and at the same time, I had this predicament of like, look, it's hard to sell a physical CD nowadays. I don't have a CD player. If someone gave me a CD, I have no device to play it on. So
Right.
am I going to release it? How am I going to release this music? And then it just dawned on me, literally all the songs that we're writing were songs that were about the stories that I were telling. A song like the song Otage in Haiti about the story when I was held hostage in Haiti, and a song about this orchestra thing about when I played this gig with this, and it's all these crazy stories. I wrote music behind it, and I'm like, duh, this makes total sense. Let me just release this whole thing as a book, and then people buy the book, and then they have like a download code. They download the music, so it's essentially, for lack of better words, a big liner notes. Like it's like bringing the liner notes back around, because I feel like the story behind the music, to me, I always love that stuff. I love reading the liner notes. I want to know what someone's inspiration is behind this story, behind whatever they did, and that's what I wanted to do. So it's you can read it as a book and it's cool. You could just read the book, or you could just listen to music, and they both, I wanted it to stand alone by itself, but it is in a product that it's a physical paperback book that it's made to like be a comical thing you can put on your coffee table and read, or put on your toilet, or wherever you're. It's interesting. And there's a lot of anecdote stuff in there. There's stories that the kind of things you don't want your mother-in-law to hear, the stuff I wasn't ever planning on putting out, but it was really neat adventure, and I got to give Drew the credit because it was kind of his idea to put it all together into this one product, or at least to release that material that I thought I would just kind of be buried into long car trips and car rides and stuff like that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
How did you find that when now that you have that out, now that it's released, how did you find when it comes to maybe the music business side, how did that, it being both a book and an album, did that help it? Did you find that it was easier to, kind of, for it to reach larger audiences because you combined the two formats?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, there's probably a couple of reasons behind that. One, like I said earlier, I feel like my bigger strength comes in the book thing because for most people, most musicians have not published a book. And to me, that doesn't make me any more special than anybody else, but I've done it. And that was like a thing that separated me from anybody else. So in terms of marketing it, it's like, hey, there's this new book that's also an album. There was almost like the shock factor of it, of like, whoa, I got to see what this is. I have no idea. So I had more people, you release an album and most people, and nowadays, at least for me, like I'm gonna go stream it. And if it's someone I really appreciate, I'm gonna go support them in some way I can, whether I'm buying the album or buy merch or whatever. But a lot of people don't necessarily do that. So I think it was a lot of that X factor of it just being something completely different. Like, oh, this is a new thing. I just want to check this out. And that was like kind of the hot commodity. And then on top of that, having that experience of having released a book before and knowing how to push that. And again, but I think it all goes back to the X factor thing of just being something different, which is that's everything for me. Being a tuba player, like anything I do is going to be different just by the instrument that I play.
Yeah, Bill, maybe you could touch a little bit more on how you actually went about releasing that. If any other musicians checking this out would be interested in that process, if they've never, like you said, never released a book, where might they begin?
Yeah, so it's really easy. I mean, you have a couple options when releasing a book. You can go and hunt out a publisher, or you can do it yourself. And there's a lot of online print-on-demand things, and that's honestly what I did. And there's no shame in that. You release a book, unless you're like a really big person and a huge name, you're like a James Patterson or something, mm-hmm. You release a book, you have a big following, a big company, you have a publisher, all that stuff's taken care of. For me, I didn't have any of that. But what I did have is the fact that, I have this website that I literally found, and I researched different print-on-demand sites. And going back to my first book, when I first released it, I literally printed probably 300 books, and you just go online and it literally guides you through the whole process of like, all right, you could do this. There's companies like Amazon that does it nowadays. Mm-hmm. And you just Google print on demand and you'll find things that guide you through the process. The difficult part to me comes within the formatting and putting it all together. Like coming up with the information was easy, but like actually saying, okay, this is the book format it needs to fit, and this is the kind of thing that it has to go by. Mm-hmm. To me, that was like this biggest learning curve as a musician, figuring that out. But the actual printing part of it was really easy. I sent it out, uploaded like a PDF, and I get a draft book back, and I look at it and say, well, that's terrible. I got to fix this, this, and this. And I probably did that 3 or 4 times until I had the final draft. So it was just literally me. And then I took all of my friends and family, and I gave them a copy of the book and a big red marker. Mm-hmm. Editor team, like, you're all going to edit this book for me. So I handed out like 10 books of people that I thought had good literacy skills, and to just go and edit everything, and they just gave it back to me. And then I went and made a whole bunch of adjustments, didn't realize how bad my grammar was, and then just fixed a lot of the adjustments, and then that was the book. And the beautiful thing about that is with the print on demand, you can, if you go back and realize that there's something that you did make a mistake, you can always change it for the next round that you're about to order. So if anybody is looking to do something like that, I always recommend doing a small batch up front. Like, you're tempted to just, because you get discounts in bulk. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to say, like, I want to order a bunch, but start with something simple like 20 books, because by the time you sell those 20 books, you realize that, oh my gosh, there's some like big thing I need to fix here. And it's easy to turn around, and they come quick. I mean, it's not as fast as Amazon, but you wait a week and you got 100 books there, or 200, 300, or whatever you want.
So, Bill, you were actually holding the like physical copies yourself and then selling those like to people you knew?
Yeah. So, with this one, I sold it. I held the merch myself, mm-hmm. And then I set up an account with like USPS where I could print my own postage. Okay. Because every time you get, anybody who does merch stuff, you get an order and it's like a blessing and a curse. You're like, great, I got a new sale online. It's like, I got to go mail this thing now, you know?
Yeah.
So I didn't want to have to deal with that. I wanted it to be super automated. So I had it set up where I would just get an order and it would automatically populate the print and label thing. So like twice a week, I would just print them all out and I had them all prepackaged, ready to go. And I just dropped them in the mailbox. I didn't have to go to the post office. So that was easy for that one. The first book I did, I actually had more of a distribution plan, and I sold it on my Japan tour across Japan, and I linked up with a production company to do that one. But this one was just purely by myself, kind of just selling it out of my studio, essentially.
Cool. Yeah, I think those details will help.
Great. Well, I mean, you know, you have a lot of stories to tell. You go on the road a lot. We've been on the road together. Was there any particular story in Topless in Tokyo, before we kind of move forward, that was, like you were mentioning, you know, was it something a little offbeat or something that readers might want, or listeners might want to check out?
I mean, I can go right. I wasn't going to give you guys the good stuff, but I mean, I can go right for the gold. The book is the book is called Topless in Tokyo, and everybody wonders what the title is, and it scares people. Like, don't Google Topless in Tokyo, because you'll find a whole bunch of questionable stuff. Google Topless in Tokyo, Bill Muter, and it'll steer you right down the right direction. But okay, so I'll try to give you the Cliff Notes version. Mm-hmm. My first tour, I would say my first like professional gig that I did, I got hired to play in this Broadway show in Japan. And for that show, we did like a couple weeks of rehearsal, 4 weeks of rehearsal in Indiana. And then I had a couple days lay off at home. And then I was to fly out to tech rehearsal in Tokyo for like 4 weeks. So the night before, I'm like, I'm going to go stay at my sister's house. She lives real close to the airport. You know, she could drive me. I had like a really early flight. And that night I get to my sister. She's like, hey, let's go out in Fort Lauderdale. Let's go party a little bit. You know, my girlfriends are having a get together. You want to join? I'm like, yeah, you know, whatever, you know, but I don't want to stay out late. Like, I got an early flight, you know, this is my first thing, you know, I got to be ready. So that's fine. So I get there, and it turns out it's actually like a going away party for me. And everybody's like, yo, Bill, you're going to Japan. You got this gig, you know, it's going to be dope. And it was like, it was just crazy. I'll spare you guys some of the details. I'll leave it in the book. But we ended up getting like a police escort back to her house that night. And I was like, I probably got in like 3 a.m, and then I had to leave at 4 to go to the airport. So I got like 30 minutes of sleep, which was just enough to like turn the line from like I drank way too much to like now I'm hungover and I still feel like I drank too much, and I'm still like I'm in like both phases. Yeah. And neither of them were like a blissful phase at that point. So I don't remember going through the airport. I don't remember going through security, and then I get on the plane, and a couple of the people in the cast were on the plane with me and looking at me like, dude, you're a hot mess. Like, what are you gonna do? I'm like, I'll be fine, man. I got some Dunkin' Donuts. I'm going to eat some sugary donuts and a coffee colada, and I will be good. Anyways, the plane goes to taxi, and I feel my whole world like just drifting away from me. So I hit the stewardess button, and that's the last thing I remember. I woke up on a stretcher in the terminal of Fort Lauderdale International Airport, like paddles waking me back up to life. I died on the plane. They got oxygen. Like, they literally closed off the entire wing of the airport. They got all the paramedics there. Everybody's watching the pilot standing out there and like reviving me, bringing me back to life. I guess I was really severe alcohol poisoning. I mean, this is mind you, this is my like early 20s. I made some bad decisions at that point, and I had overdone it. And I woke up, and so that flight. It's hard to tell this story fast. So I essentially died in a plane, for lack of better words. Where the topless part comes in, the pilot actually let me back on the flight. Turns out if you tell him that you're afraid of flying and that's why you actually passed out, he's like very warm and welcoming. But I got on the flight, and everybody on there was like giving me the stank eye, like, this guy, you know, they're all on their phone. Like, this guy was just da-da-da-da-da. And we flew to LAX. And that was probably like the longest flight of my life, just because I was just such in a bad state. Anyways, when our flight landed, we missed our flight to Japan, and I had to get grounded overnight. And we stayed in a hotel. That day, first day we were supposed to be in Japan. We were supposed to have this TV shoot for Fuji TV, this big thing, and I missed it. So I get there the next day. I told them it was bad weather. So any of the producers listening right now, you now realize it wasn't bad weather that didn't get me there. But anyways, we got to Japan. We had our opening night party, and this production company, like, they're huge. Like, they're the people that produced the Beatles' first tour of Japan. They produced Michael Jackson in Japan. Oh, so, wow. Like, the amount of pull they have to put on a party is ridiculous. So when we got there, it was just, like, full-on party the first night. And then I was like, boom, I'm in it. Like, I got my gig. Like, I made it. And I was just, like, going hard again. And so we went out to Roppongi in Tokyo, which is like kind of like the red light district. And we went out, and in this group we were in, we would get free drinks anywhere we go. There's this famous bar, the Lex. And we would go and drink for free. So we go to the place next door, like get a free drink. And we get to this last place, and this woman's like, hey, man. Well, she didn't say it like that. She's like, hey, free whiskey drink, free whiskey drink, come on up. So we go in, and she's got like this red dress on, very like kind of odd, like just strange. She was like fully dressed up, asking, if we want a free whiskey drink. So I was like, yeah, let's go get a free drink. But we're going up. It was me and a friend of mine. I won't say his name to incriminate him, but we're going up like this flight of stairs that was like this fire escape. And we get up there, and this woman was there, and she disappears, and this big dude comes in and throws me in a room, throws my friend in a room, and this other woman comes off and like rips her shirt off. She's like, special massage, 3,000 yen. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not happening. I'm not about to do it. Like, this is all crazy. This is my first night in Japan. I'm not going to do this, but and I'm like, is this what happens here? Is this what people really do when they come? And I'm like this, as they call gaijin, like this stupid foreigner. Uh-huh. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do this. So my friend runs downstairs. He's like, hey, man, let's get out of here. But I won't judge you if you stay. It's cool. Like, if you want to stay, it's fine. I'm like, no, man, I'm out. So the other woman that was in his room comes in and rips off my shirt. And she's like, oh, 2 for the price of 1, And I ran out of there, and I got downstairs, and anyways, the kicker is I got down and I had no shirt on, and I'm like this big, hairy tuba player in the middle of Tokyo, like 3 o'clock in the morning. You can't hail a cab at that time if you're like a inebriated foreigner. Uh-huh. And so, everybody gives you like the big X, and I had to take the subway home or back to the hotel. And I didn't realize we had a matinee performance the next day, which I totally bombed. And so that's I guess that's kind of the Cliff Notes story, part of the story. And this is strange to anybody. I guess anybody who knows me, this is very strange, because this is not like the type of person that I am.
I get a text. Not at all. Yeah. Not at all. I didn't even know that half of this story, dude. And we toured. I'm hearing this for the first time. This is nuts.
I'm sorry. I didn't know if you guys, when you asked for a story, I'm like, I don't know how much they want to go.
No,
like,
that's great.
I'm always the guy that shows up to the gig with like, hey man, I got some XLRs if you need it. I got a schedule for the day. Like, yeah. I'm just like usually that person, but like I was not that person when I was younger. I was not. I mean, luckily that gig taught me how to be that person and taught me how to like get my act together. So I'm glad they didn't fire me from the first day. Because I was like the first time I got to actually work with some like real musicians and people that weren't just playing in like some random bars just as a hobby, but like we're doing this thing. And that like changed everything over. But man, that was an interesting. So that's my Topless in Tokyo. I ended up topless in Tokyo, and there's no bad images in the book. Luckily, nobody has pictures or video of that event.
Yeah, this is all.
But I guess
if you do, send it to JazzMemes.
Yeah, if you do.
If you do, you know where to send it.
I do have a picture of me like ripping my shirt off in the middle of Shibuya and like that big intersection that I ended up doing for something. But yeah, definitely not from that night. That night, for some reason, how inebriated I was is like etched in stone in my memory, and great detail, and some detail that I did not go into. Nothing incriminating that happened to me. I spilled all the beans. I literally died in a plane. So I mean, people. And the funny thing is, I hate I hate flying, and people are always like, no, man, when you fly more, you're going to get better with it. I'm like, dude, I've flown all around the world, and I've hated it. And they're like, well, what's wrong? Like, what, is something ever happened? I was like, yeah, I died on a plane once. And they're like, oh, okay. I mean, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, that would be it. Well, I mean, to transition, honestly, you know, going from those early years, like now, I mean, some of the things that, you know, I've seen you do with, like we talked, you know, you mentioned earlier, a good friend of ours, Drew Tucker, you've even gone and worked for the United States Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs. Like you're a modern day, you're going around giving clinics, giving concerts yourself now. Are you a jazz ambassador at this point? Is that what you're telling me? Like,
I mean, the jazz ambassador thing was really cool. And if you don't know what that is, check it out. You can literally Google jazz ambassadors, like a Wikipedia page about it. But it, you know, it started back in the 50s, and people like, you know, you had these great, amazing artists, Louis Armstrong, Dizzy Gillespie, these people who were like the first jazz ambassadors, and the government would send them out to these areas to basically show like, hey, look, we're the United States. We have it all together. And we totally did not have it together. Like the U.S. had all sorts of terrible things going on with segregation and everything else, but they would send these artists out to literally, their goal was to improve the image of the U.S. And luckily, since then, that same line of funding has existed in the government, and even through this administration right now. And we had the opportunity to go a couple of years ago, and we made it as what the jazz ambassadors, they call cultural ambassadors now. They open it up to all different genres. But we went out to Costa Rica and Mexico, and we're able to teach and play, which is what I love. You know, those two things are my passions kind of combined. So that was a really neat, really amazing, fulfilling opportunity. And what I learned from that was just, you know, I went into this thing thinking like, okay, we're going to go to these places and show people what we do and teach these things. But I feel like I ended up learning, learning more from that than I probably gave. Like it was this huge cultural exchange that was really, really cool, and just a phenomenal opportunity to be a part of that group. And if the alumni that has gone through that jazz ambassador lineage over the years is just phenomenal. There's a lot of people that you probably don't know about that were part of it. There's been hundreds since, you know, those early days in the 50s. But yeah, that's definitely like a huge 180 compared to the last story I told with my Tokyo adventures.
Is that something any jazz musician today can apply for? Is that a program? Because, you know, I had never even heard of that program. I've heard of the early program, you know, that Disney went on and did Brubeck, but I'd never known that it had carried into the modern day. Is that something that anyone can apply for? I mean, I think that's something most musicians would be really interested in.
Yeah, so it's real easy. You just go to, there's a couple people that run it. There's a group called American Voices and American Music Abroad. If you just look up American Music Abroad, they have different programs. And their ambassador program, it's sponsored by the U.S. Department of State, Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. I got that right.
It's a long name. I looked it up.
Yeah. It's like a really like a huge acronym. But if you go look up American Music Abroad, each year they open it up to new submissions. And there's you know, hundreds of groups that audition. You send in like your materials, and then if they're like that, then they send you back a letter and say, hey, we're going to, you know, invite you to an audition. So we send in a packet. And we honestly forgot about it. I forgot that we did it. At the time, we were like applying for festivals. We were doing all this different stuff. So, you know, sometimes you apply for that stuff and you totally forget what you did. And then it was like 6 months later, we got an email like, hey, we love your packet. We love your music. Will you come up to Joe's Pub in New York and do this audition for us? You have a 17-minute audition and you play. So they flew us up there, took care of everything. We had 17 minutes of an audition and then literally flew back. We were there less than 24 hours. And like a week later, we found out we made it. And it was a great experience because, you know, you get to be you, and you get the support of the government. You get the support of, you know, I travel with my tuba, and I never get to travel with my tuba. Sometimes I've been on flights where it's been free, and I've been on flights where it's over $800 to check this thing. And they're like, okay, swipe the credit card, no big deal. So, I mean, there's so much bad light on the government, but just because whatever politics you like or don't like, there's so much good going on at the same time that honestly I didn't know existed until we kind of heard about this. And Drew is the one who found out about it, and I think it was like through Jonathan Scales or someone like that was like, hey, you would be really good at this. And for any jazz musician or any musician in general that's interested, it's largely educational based. So if you're a teacher out there, I mean, this is the thing. And I think there's so many great educators that don't know this exists, and you guys should check it out because it's really a great opportunity, especially if that's what you love to do. And that was just a natural thing. All of us in the group, we teach for a living. We teach and play, and it's probably a 50-50 for all of us. So it was right down our wheelhouse, and a really, really amazing opportunity. And you never know where they're going to send you. It could be anywhere from Afghanistan to Mexico to wherever, and it's really, really fun.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, I think a lot of people and a lot of musicians, like I said, myself included, did not know about that program. And you mentioned Tuba, so I kind of wanted to get into this. You have a new book coming out or course that you've written for tuba. Is that true?
Yeah, it's called The Modern Tuba. So essentially, as a tuba player, if there's any tuba players listening, at least the way I come up, I know is not untypical of most tuba players. I kind of got typecasted. Like I was like this, like the young blonde girl ends up playing the flute, and like the short, like stubby kid ends up playing the tuba. That was totally me, and I got typecasted in the role. And when you come up in school as a tuba player, you're not exposed to jazz education, largely, unless you live in a place like New Orleans where, you're able to have that. And the funny thing is, tuba is one of the original instruments in early jazz. Like that was the bass instrument, and nobody sees it that way nowadays because a lot of times in school and education, it's all about the big band setting. And the modern big band does not include the tuba. So, coming up through middle school, coming up through high school, I was just never exposed to that. And it wasn't until I got into gigging where someone was like, hey, we're in this key, just walk a bass line. I was like, oh my gosh. And I would fake it and then go home and figure out, like, what does that even mean? I don't know what that means. And I would study that for like days and days and take a couple lessons. And then I was on another gig. So for me, a lot of it, I learned it by kind of getting my butt kicked on the bandstand and then going back and formally studying it. So I wanted to be able to offer tuba players specifically that kind of education that I felt like I never got early on, that I know a lot of tuba players don't get, like how to walk bass lines, how to be a bass player, how to improvise, how to hang, and on top of that, how to get gigs and maintain gigs. Because, when I was coming out of high school, I was told, if you're going to go into music, you're either going to be a performer, jazz or classical, and if you're not a good performer, if you're not a good musician, you're going to be a teacher, and that's what you do. And I was like, oh, I don't want to be that. I'm a good performer. I'm going to go play. And as a tuba player, when you go to college, you study classical music. 9 times out of 10, that's what you do. So you have these phenomenal tuba players that come out, and then they go and get hired somewhere, and someone says, hey man, there's this tune, they're playing guitar and it's in E, and they're like, just play this bass line, and the tuba player's like stuck in the mud, like they don't know what to do. So, I want to be able to offer those kind of opportunities and some of the training that I've probably learned the hard way and put it into not just a book, but an online course that's interactive where people can see videos. And I have a lot of great tuba players in the community. Some of the biggest names like Tuba Gooding Jr., who plays with the Roots, like he's a part of it. He's sending some videos in, and I got a lot of people in the tuba community involved to just kind of get some information out. And I think a lot of us, most tuba players probably learn the route that I did of kind of just figuring it out on the gigs and then going and doing the training later, again, outside of like a place like New Orleans. So this book is essentially that. It's offering those kind of things. It's called The Modern Tuba Player. It's a book, but it's also a 4-week online course. It'll be coming out mid to late May. So that's like my big hustle right now is trying to get that out.
Awesome. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to it. I mean, I agree with you. It wasn't until we played that I'd actually even shared the stage with a tuba. And I think some of the things that were so cool were just seeing how you were modernizing it or bringing it into these environments that I don't think many people were expecting, but it was more than appropriate. And in some cases, I mean, do you think that there's like some of the things I'm sure you get into in the book. What if a tuba player is out there? What are some things they can do to start? I mean, besides obviously checking out your book and your course, what are some things they should do to start getting or bridging that gap from what they're being kind of told in school, or what are some things they can do to kind of get a more open mindset for the real world experiences they're going to probably face?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing you could do, and I hate saying this because I feel like this is what every jazz musician says, is like transcribe stuff, but not even that, is just listen to music and listen down to the bass lines and play those bass lines. I feel like I kind of had a leg up because I was never super passionate about classical music, and I always listened to a lot of modern music. Mm-hmm. And I transcribed before I knew transcribing was really, that's what you're supposed to do. I just did it for fun, you know? So I feel like if it's, you know, a young tuba player, I always put him hip to the bass players that I'm also a bass player. I play bass, and so that kind of gave me that leg up. So I would say study Ray Brown. I would say study your electric bass players, study your jackos, study like all the people that you would study as a bass player are the people that you should study as a tuba player. And those are the things that you start to realize, like, okay, if I studied this person, this lineage goes to this person, and this person studied this person. And don't be afraid to dive into the bass players. And I think that's the biggest thing. Tuba players listen to more tuba players, but there's not a lot of tuba players that are playing jazz nowadays. So, you know, the best thing that you could do is listen to bass players and try to play those bass lines. And that's upright bass, that's electric bass, and that's key bass. Some of the key bass players are like the funkiest bass players that I've ever met. So the more that you listen to that stuff and just play along with it, it just becomes a part of you. Instead of it just like, okay, I'm going to do it now. I mean, I can give you technical information, and the book does some of that. But the first thing I say in my course is it's a lot of listening exercises and studying some of the greats that came before us. And to me, that's like your first route to that. And you're going to mess up. You're not going to feel right at first, but that's part of the fun. You know, you're going to go on a gig and realize that you need to learn something else. And that's kind of the journey, is, you know, getting out of the practice room and actually applying that stuff. I think that's just as important as a study as well.
I think that's so true. I want to thank you for coming on today. I mean, really, you represent to me someone who does it all. You educate, you perform, you're writing, you're a super creative individual, quite honestly. And every time we're on the bandstand, it's a joy. But also every time we're hanging, you're always telling me some new project you're checking out or doing, and I've always found that inspiring. But I want to appreciate you coming on. If you guys want to check him out online, he's Tuba Visionary. So at Tuba Visionary, if you want to find him online, check him out. Check out his upcoming book. Check out his old stuff. Is there anything you want to say before we sign off to the young? I mean, we have a huge audience, obviously international, but a lot of young players too. Is there anything you want to leave them with before we sign off?
I mean, sure. First off, thank you guys for allowing me to be on here and have the opportunity to do this interview. But I just want to offer this. This is for the young tuba players, but it's for everybody, really. And, you know, don't let someone tell you can't do something because you play a certain instrument or you do a certain thing. I feel like there's room for everybody out there. If there's room for me to be this awkward tuba kid from like South Florida that can come up and make a living and have a house and have a, you know, a place and a car and make a, you know, have a living doing this thing and playing the instrument that I do, I feel like there's room for everybody out there. So, you know, there was definitely times coming up where there was people that discouraged me and people that encouraged me. And if you're hanging out with those people that discourage you, find a new group and find people like you guys, that everybody that lifts each other up. You know, you got to have a tribe. You got to have your people that take care of each other. So, you know, that's the most important thing. You know, if anybody's out there, you know, just you feel discouraged, just know that there's a lane for everybody. You know, we're trained as jazz musicians to study the lineage, like I said, and transcribe. But at the end of the day, you got to be you. And you if you have a passion that leads you in a different route, then go that route and do it up, do it 100%. Because even though it may be painful at first, if you're really true to who you are, I feel like the passion will be there. Everything else kind of works itself out. And I didn't go into any of this, any of the books, any of that stuff with honestly a business mindset at first. Although that is a huge part of my day-to-day thinking, I just went into it because I loved it and I had the passion for it. So if there's something you're passionate for, just drive to that, and the other stuff will work itself out.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Bill.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Be safe, and we will talk to you guys again soon. And thanks, JazzMemes family, for checking this out. And we'll hopefully share another conversation shortly, man. Thanks, Bill.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Later, y'all.